Welcome to the Soul Infused Monday Show, your show for an inspired and meaningful way. I'm your host, Sonia Bueno de la Torre, self love coach, energy healer, spiritual mentor. And today's episode is a very special episode because I have a special guest today. And her name is Marcy Neumann. Marcy, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much, Sonia. I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm excited for our conversation. I'm excited to be able to really connect heart to heart with our audience and, of course, to just feel everything that we've come here to feel and explore. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. It's such a pleasure. And we are going to dive in just a minute. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Marcy, and you have also the opportunity to leave a comment if you have a question. At the end of the day, we can look into that. But in a moment, I'm just checking in who's already live here. And please let me know if you hear and see us, because internet has been a little bit of a tricky thing today. Okay, so welcome again to the Soul Infused Monday Show. My super special dear friend and special guest today, Marcy Neumann, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. So, Marcy, for over 45 years, Marcy's journey has been guided by her own teachings of self-love and energy healing. And she also created an own process called heart shifting, a recalibration of energy resulting in a greater ability to manifest health, happiness, and greater love. She is also known as a manifestation coach, a spiritual minister, and certified past life regression hypnotherapist. She's also a published author and founder of Self Love University. She also, and you want to grab a pen and a paper, because we're going to talk about this a little later, but she also is a co-host of a monthly TV show called The Heartcentered Woman. And this special episode for this month is coming up this Thursday on September 15th, and I am one of the guests. I'm super excited about that too. So I'm going to send you the link later, or you can see it in the comments, but take a note. It is this Thursday, September 15th. What time is that, Marcy, again?
It's 1:00 Eastern time.
Okay, exactly. 1:00
From
Eastern
1 to
time,
3.
Thursday. 1 to 3. Yeah, a 2-hour special. And Marcy's going to talk more about this later, right, Marcy?
Yes, for sure.
But I just wanted you to already, put it on your notebook. And it's completely free, and I'm super excited about that. But today we are talking about self-love. And the title for today is The Misunderstood Path to You. And before we're diving, I want to dive in right away. So first of all, I would love to hear from you. What does self-love mean to you?
So I think my definition of self-love is a little bit unusual in that when I talk about self-love, what I'm really talking about is you reaching this place within yourself where you recognize your own divinity and accept it. So a lot of times we talk about, who we are, this greater version of ourselves, right? And we are continuously looking for that to be explored, to unfold, to be a greater version over and over and over again. And so self-love, from my perspective, is simply accepting that the wholeness is already there. And that everything else that you are seeing is really just the result of certain experiences where you haven't yet come into this place of remembrance. And so, this life on the earth is filled with contrast. It's meant to, it's meant for us to be a place of exercise, right? So that we can build this greater strength in acknowledging who we are. And so self-love is that process of truly coming into this knowingness about who we are. And then, of course, cultivating the courage to follow that. So
Yes.
self-love is very much connected to this courage, so that you can have clarity in aligning then your actions with who you remember being.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I, on some level, I totally agree. Like we are beyond what we are, appear to be. But I
Mm-hmm.
really love what you said about the courage, because I think that's often, maybe that's part of the misunderstanding that I'm gonna ask you in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But it's it's so courageous. It takes a lot of courage to really love yourself, because it's so
Yeah.
much easier to judge yourself or to put yourself small because we're conditioned that way. And I don't know in your experience. So for anyone who is listening in and sometimes self-love appears to be too much, then you can also substitute it with self-acceptance or appreciation. We've been on the path for so long. My following totally. I think you are preaching to the choir here. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I want to dive in right into the title, because I really liked the title you gave. It's like the misunderstood path of to you, basically.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that and what you mean by that, and what um, the listeners, so that they have an idea what is the misunderstanding here.
Yeah. There are a number of misunderstandings. The one that I find that most people have is that they confuse self-care with self-love. They look at
Mm.
self-care as being the same as self-love. And quite frankly, it's not even in the same realm. Self-care is made up of the various things that we do to soothe and comfort ourselves. So these can be things like putting on a hat if it's raining outside or if you're cold, dressing appropriately. It can be going for a massage. It can be, like my favorite is going for a pedicure. These are things that truly comfort us, soothe us, and they contribute to the softening of our inner energy field. And people often think that that's self-love. But self-care is and can be used as a preliminary avenue to self-love, because it does soothe us. Self-love takes you out of your comfort zone. It has nothing to do with soothing you. In fact, we describe it as us needing courage to go on that journey. There's a reason for that, because you will be called to step out of your comfort zone 100% of the time, because self-love is the path to self-actualization. It is the path to, as we said earlier, to accepting yourself in all of your wholeness. So self-care, I also want to differentiate it in this way. Self-care is also what many people consider to be selfish. Okay? Oh, you're spending way too much time taking care of yourself. You're spending way too much time doing, those frivolous things, get back to work, sort of a thing. And so people have deemed it to be selfish because of the confusion between self-care and self-love. Self-love has kind of become bastardized because of it. So automatically people believe that self-love is being selfish. And perhaps there is a part of it that is, but we'll talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But
And yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, but when we start to realize that we are the ones who need to differentiate this in our lives, what happens is we start to see the world and all of our experiences and opportunities through a brand new lens. Because we can then move out of the guilt and the shame that's associated with too much indulgence of self-care. And we can start to look at self-love not just as our responsibility, but in truth, our obligation.
And I hear a question from someone. I mean, not that I hear, but I just, I'm so in tune with, as you just started the self-care conversation. I don't want to dive too deep into that. I have other questions, but so I also experience a lot of, especially women, also men though, but women in particular, that don't actually practice a lot of self-care and take time for themselves, whether that's self-love or not. So they feel actually bad by doing that, right? So can you give, I just think that someone needs to hear this today. So it's just a few tips, or like, okay, so if I'm not taking care of myself, or I feel bad about doing that, what can they start doing?
So again, everything from my perspective is about awareness. When you start to recognize that you are feeling badly about taking care of yourself, one of those things, and we're talking about acceptance over and over and over again, there are just some things you need to accept. And that is, whenever you're feeling that, it's associated with guilt and shame that has come to you from the outside. It does not come from the inside. Is it sort of integrated into our inner workings? Yes, but it actually comes from forces outside that are holding you to an expectation, or have a contrived ideal of who you should be and how you should be in service to them. And that's why the guilt and shame is often used to prevent people from caring for themselves. What it also indicates is that the ego, which is that self-protective aspect of you, is utilizing that guilt and shame in order to prevent you from remembering who you really are. And that self-care is essential because of the comfort that it brings to us. And excuse me, it soothes us. So what that does is we go from these contracted states in our energy field, from, the constant drive to do, right? Trying to live up to all those other expectations. And the self-care gives us that momentary relief where we can take a breath, where we can allow ourselves to be soft. And in that softness, the energy field starts to open and you can receive. So this is essential, because if we're constantly in this contracted state, we cannot receive the guidance, the messages, the source of light that's there to infuse our soul. So even though it may feel counterintuitive, in reality, it feels that way only because of all of those outside influences that up until that moment you've been reacting to. So one of the things also about self-love is that rather than being a reaction, self-love is a response. It is a response to those messages. It is a response to the guidance that we are getting. And the path lays out before us. And of course, as I said before, excuse me, it's going to, it's going to take us in a direction. It's going to challenge us. We will be uncomfortable.
Definitely. Yes.
Excuse me.
And I do want to, just go ahead and drink some water. You said a few things, especially about the shame and the guilt, and that, I mean, that applies in many areas, but also I often say that as well, is that it sometimes for people it's about awareness because they don't perceive it as outside forces because it's so ingrained since
Right.
childhood. So
Mhm.
I want to just emphasize what you said, that as because I feel that it's very helpful to hear to say, okay, so when you experience that, you just with awareness and you can respond. So just, and say, hey, that's just something that is not who I really am. That's a part that I'm experiencing, right? And that's what I think we are on the same page about. Self-love does not mean, it means ultimately you embrace everything, but who you love is who you are being as that nature of not the one part and not the pattern and not the drama and not that you embrace it, you accept that, you love all of it in a way, but that it comes from outside. I think it's an important piece also why the inner work is so important to really disentangle from it energetically so that you're not identified with it. But I also like what you said about the ego, that because often it's so demonized. I don't think the
Mhm.
ego is a part of our protection mechanism. There's nothing bad about it unless you're totally unaware. So I liked how you said that it's a self-protection mechanism.
Mhm.
um, so for would you then say, with what you just shared, for someone that says, oh yeah, that's it's just the awareness when you feel that way, to say, okay, this is actually not me, this is coming from outside, and I'm going to respond accordingly. Would that be an approach?
Yes, absolutely. Because everything in the universe is governed by your free will. So even, the influence that the ego has on you, it's governed by your free will. So as you become more and more adept at that awareness, right? Really tuning in to your energy field and what's happening. What happens is that you make that choice faster and faster. It's not that it's ever not present. The ego is constantly present, again, because it's that protective mechanism. But when we mature into this higher level of understanding all of these mechanisms and systems that have been put into place so that we can be a greater version of ourselves, what happens is, as you were saying, we learn to appreciate what the ego is saying, but we're making a choice based on our acknowledgement of truth. And so that truth, of course, is the truth of who we are. So I just want to backtrack for 1 second because this is so important.
Hmm.
In talking about guilt and shame, energetically, there is very little that erodes your sense of self as guilt and shame does.
Yeah.
And I want you to think about it as a chemical reaction. You are this beam of light, right? And what happens is when guilt and shame are introduced, this beam of light that has connection to all of the energy around you, guilt and shame causes you to do this. So, where you're once this expansive beam, you get smaller and smaller and smaller. And in that contraction, you no longer have access to all of that expansive energy that's around you that you are actually meant to be creating with. So you diminish your own supply of energy for creating a life that is in tune with your heart's desires. So, this is why it's so important that we develop this keen awareness and this level of consciousness that, as you said, Sonia, it reminds us we have a choice, right? Doesn't mean that it's not there. It means we can pivot. And one of the things that I say is that new life begins every nanosecond that we choose it to. Nanosecond. Bam, 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 bam. And it's actually how we're meant to respond to the energetic um, uh, influences around us. It's like we choose this and we choose that and we choose that, and then we go in this direction. And then we go in that direction and go in this direction, because that's what creation does. It just continually moves forward.
Yes. Exactly. I think that's also such an important piece, that the one constant thing is change of
Correct.
anything, right? It's like things are changing constantly. What I also liked about what you said about that nanosecond is so often, and I'm sure, and in a moment, I'm going to ask you also to share something, because sometimes what I find also is often misunderstood, or a false conception or perception about self love, is once you have that sense, or it's something that you acquire, and then you love yourself, and then you never experience anything uncomfortable or judgment or whatever. And my audience knows me very well. I'm very transparent, right? And
Me too.
so that's not true at all. However, how we respond to it is a difference, and over time we evolve. But first off, what you said, every nanosecond, so you can shift. And I remember in the past, for example, like, I struggled with overeating and some other things, and so when you had a bad day, you were doomed for the rest of the day. Like, there was not like, oh, I can shift now. It's like there was no shifting. I might have been caught days, weeks, months, years in it, but to remember is like, but every moment you can still shift.
Yes.
Okay, you just did something, you judged yourself for it, you have feel shame, guilt, and that's all okay, and then
Mhm.
you can still start fresh right now. So right now, this second, right this moment, you can just start fresh. But
That's
tell me,
right.
Marcy, share something, so that I find it always so refreshing when we step out of that perception of, what so often is in social media, or some of the gurus. Oh my God, I'm so enlightened. Everything is perfect. And I'm only, I always say, like, anyone's, um, everybody not struggles, but yeah, sometimes, but goes through their own motions and stuff. So
Yeah.
just experiencing that connection, for me, self-love is also knowing who you are underneath all that stuff that is from outside. So, but that doesn't mean that other things don't happen to us. Would you be so open and kind to share something from your own life that you say, hey, this also happens to me, we're still human.
So, of course, it happens to us. Number one, it's meant to, because that's how we further sort of peel back the layers of the
Right.
parts of us that are misaligned with our wholeness. So, this happens to me on a daily basis, just like anybody else. Oh, what story to share with you? Let's see. Well, um, I'm going to use my recent road trip as an example. So I had made an arrangement to. I was on the road driving, and I made an arrangement at a hotel, and I did it all online, of course, as I do as I'm traveling, like minutes before. And
Yeah.
I'm reading through the description of the hotel, and I noticed I was a little uncomfortable, and I brushed it off as being, just because I had been driving so long. So I hit the button, I pay for it automatically, it's non refundable. And I am driving along, and all of a sudden, I get this sense that that hotel might not be safe. So my immediate response is, I'm safe wherever I go. I'm safe wherever I go. It's okay. Whatever it is, I'll handle it. It's only for a night, and I'm on the road early tomorrow morning. And I'm driving a little further, and I get this again. And I am so aware that these thoughts are coming into my mind that are very unusual for me. So I had made a stop, and I decided just to be quiet for a while and see if I could tune in to what was true. Was it something that what I was not going to be safe in? Or was it, was there something else that was being used by the ego, right, to bring this fear in? And as I'm sitting there, all of a sudden the thought comes in, well, just in case it isn't safe, what's your plan? What's your plan? And I found myself like, creating this whole plan about what if it wasn't safe? And then I started arguing with myself. So I'm arguing with myself because I'm saying, how manifestation works. If you're already planning that that's not going to be safe, it's exactly what you're going to experience. And then the other part of me is saying, I want you to be cautious, Marcy. So here I am, clearly in this state of confusion, in this state of awareness that I'm more or less at war within me. Okay. So I had to start to look at, and this is what's important, I had to start to look at what I had been thinking about before that. And when you're on the road driving, you have thoughts from all over the place, right? Because you're in this trance and all these thoughts start coming in. And some of them are from, 20 years ago conversations that you had with people. Anyway, so I started to look at that and recognized that the truth is that I had some, tumultuous energy going on before I made that reservation. And in that moment, I had to accept that perhaps I had made a reservation in a place where I wasn't going to be safe. So here I am. Now I have all of this knowingness, right? But I hadn't been paying attention to that. And of course, I get off the exit of the highway, and there are all these hotels around, but not the one that I had made a reservation at. And I started to drive there, and it wasn't in a good neighborhood. And immediately, without even having to go any further, I turned my car around and I started to laugh. So, because everything had just laid out for me in this beautiful roadmap. And of course, I had this recognition about how important it is that we tune into the actual energy that our thoughts have been occupying before making decisions like that. And so I just turned my car around and I went to, a hotel that was clearly in my best interest. And honestly, I got into my room and I just smiled because I had been on, that song, I've looked at life from both sides now. I've looked at life from both sides now. And it was like, just like that.
Yeah.
Just like that.
And thank you for sharing. I have a few follow-up questions just because there's so much good stuff in there. So first of all, I can relate many times. And there's so many pieces that I see in there. So, and I'm sure many can relate. So it's first not really listening, even though we are hearing something, right? It's like, so, and it happens to all of us. That's fine. Now, and then the next step is, okay, then to listen to it when it's so loud that you really know it's there, that you can't ignore it anymore. And then how to deal with, and I had that in my community lately quite a bit as well. So how to deal with the fact that you then know, oh, and I'm not saying it's a wrong choice, but that's how it comes out for many. It's like this, oh, I should have done it differently. I knew better, and then often then the difficulty to let that go and to be like self-forgiving, let's call it self-forgiving, instead of being so harsh. And how, so what, because this is so, it's just very common right now, I get it here and there. What would you say to anyone who says how to best deal with the fact that you might have done something Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I believe life happens for us. It's there's something
I
good,
agree.
but in
Hmm.
but in that moment when you really feel like, and it could be anything, any decision in your life. It doesn't
Yep.
matter. It's like just you feel like, this was not good. I don't feel good here now. I have to, or I'm not clear. I should have, like, how to deal with that and letting that go and come into more of a self-forgiving,
Yeah.
peaceful with your choices.
Yeah. So, you just brought up some great points, and one of the things that we must start to embrace is that self-forgiveness and self-love are a marriage made in heaven. They go hand in hand because we are learning, we're sort of reprogramming ourselves so that rather than, beating ourselves up, rather than, chastising ourselves, rather than, you know, creating more dense energy with how we react, we choose a response based on energy that will inject light into the situation. This is actually heart shifting. All right. So the tendency and the way the ego will play it is to bombard you with guilt and shame. There you go again. Look at what you've done. You're going to lose all that money, blah, 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 blah. So I know that that's the ego's voice because my higher self would never speak to me that way. My higher self would say, yes, Marcy, you got it. And so in that moment, I have to choose, am I going to listen to the ego's voice that is further eroding my sense of self and my ability to hear my higher self? Or am I just pivoting, reuniting with my higher self and getting what I deserved, which was the accolades? Yes, Marcy, you got it. In that moment, that's self-forgiveness. Self-forgiveness, it gets such a bad rap. All it is letting go. It's letting go of the influence of the voice of that ego. Remember, the ego's, worst nightmare is that you remember who you are. Okay, so because then I say all heaven breaks loose. You're off traveling the world. You're doing all these wonderful things, saying yes to these incredible possibilities and opportunities that, the ego doesn't want you to do because it wants you to stay behind the couch. So we have pivoted and we have aligned ourselves again with our higher self. We're allowing that light to come in because we're letting go of the dense energy. And here's what happens. I mean, I can share with you like this whole process that I went through. I get into the whole hotel room and I'm looking around and I'm just saying, oh my God, I love you. This is awesome. I'm so thrilled that this other hotel was right here. I love this. I love that. And I go into this whole thing of just incredible appreciation. And then I go into, from appreciation, like it's pure gratitude. But I always end up with me so that I'm utilizing my appreciation of my higher self that I've allowed to come forward. I allowed that to come forward. It was the choice that I made. I could have easily have listened to the ego. And in the meantime, what I didn't share is that this is in the midst of torrential rains, thunder, lightning. I mean, you could barely see, in front of you. And I remember just sitting in that hotel room and thinking, I'm nice and warm. I'm dry. This is going to be the perfect place for me tonight. I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. The sun is going to be shining. I'm going to get back on the road. And I just immediately started to claim the beauty of everything that I had just experienced, the whole orchestration of it. And frankly, it was worth every penny.
Yeah. And it's so like we all know this pain. It's just for anyone who is still in it, because sometimes it takes a little longer for the gratitude to kick in and
Mhm.
the appreciation. So if you're in a situation that you don't feel it yet, just, just go along with it. It
Yeah,
sometimes takes a little time, and that's okay too.
it
But
sure is.
I think the gratitude and the appreciation, and also just the recognizing that um, self-love and self-forgiveness does not mean you don't have these voices anymore, or that you encounter these. It's just it's not even possible. I so often say, as long as you are a human being
Mhm.
in this incarnation, you will
Right.
have that. It's just, again, the response and how on that. So I think that is really beautifully said. So just for time, and I want you to talk a little bit about your heart-centered woman before we jump off today. And
Oh,
I think it goes very well with the topic today.
yeah,
And can you share a little bit about your heart-centered woman and what people can expect on Thursday?
for sure. So, this program in particular is all about essentially what I just described. It's number one, rebooting, right? So you've got to reboot. What do we mean by that? You've got to start to allow yourself to download new information, right? So take a look at what had happened with the whole hotel situation. Like I said, I could have allowed myself to beat myself up badly, particularly for not listening to my higher self when it came in so strongly. Um, we've got to allow ourselves new information. A Course in Miracles talks all the time about how can I see this differently? If we just allow ourselves that one grace, we will see differently. It'll change that lens that we're seeing through. So, this program on Thursday, we're talking about rebooting, releasing. You have to be willing to let it go. Now, I'm sure, Sonia, you've experienced this too, where the ego, you make the decision, okay, I'm going to respond instead of react, and you make the pivot, and that ego's voice is going, right?
Oh yeah, constantly.
Constantly. So you have to release it. And so what happens then is that in this releasing, we're actually also realigning with the truth. Remember in the beginning, I said this is all about self actualization. Self actualization can only happen if we're letting go of what was and we are repositioning ourselves. And so we're coming into these steps. We're going to be talking about real tools for how to move through these processes, because we need to know how to come back into that true, authentic self, so that number one, we can let go and release that true light that's within us. But also, we need to feel safe, and safe enough to do that. So it's all about creating your own safety no matter where you go. And so it's very apropos that that happened to me on this trip, right? Because it's part of it. We have got to really start to step up and be more masterful in what we are creating. And it first begins with the
Beautiful.
awareness. The awareness, you have to
Beautiful.
know
Yeah.
this is what's going on. So we're going to be talking about that on Thursday, giving you real tools. And you're hearing from actually 5 incredible speakers who have unbelievable experiences, life experiences. So we'll be looking at it from a spiritual aspect, from a self-love aspect, from a uh, a relationship love experience. I mean, all of these things, because these are all aspects of our life. So we'll
Beautiful.
be
Yeah.
having an incredible conversation.
And I'm super excited to be one of them, but I'm super excited to learning from the others.
Yes.
So the best teachers are the best students. So I'm really excited. So check it out. I put the link in the comment section. You can also just go to livewithmarcyandamy.com and you can sign up. It's completely for free, and join our conversation. And also, before we finish this and before you jump off, I want to ask the audience, and I usually do that, and we can listen to or read the comments later on. Take a deep breath and tune in. What's the biggest takeaway you got from today, from everything that Marcy shared today? Like, what is your takeaway? So take a nice deep breath, take a moment to kind of reflect on all the things. Maybe you took notes, maybe you had an aha moment. And the beauty of reflecting and checking in, what is your biggest takeaway? And when, if you feel open to it, share it with us. But even just for yourself, when you tune in, what about everything we shared today and Marcy shared today made the biggest impact by you just tuning in? You also anchor it. And by sharing, it even gets more energy because it puts out there. So, what is your biggest takeaway from today's conversation? And please leave a comment, or if you are watching this on a replay or you're listening to this on a podcast form, and let's just leave a review, leave us a message, a comment, and tell us what is your biggest takeaway. Marcy, it was such a pleasure. And I know we are similar in our journey right now with traveling and being here and there. And so I'm super excited to joining you on Thursday and seeing you there again, and some other incredible women. Are there any last words that you would like to share with the audience before we bring this to a close?
Yes. And that is to love yourself enough to give yourself permission to live, to allow your experiences to be the experiences that you as a soul are seeking out in order to expand and to be in your wholeness. As I said before, everything starts with your free will. The universe is just waiting to hear a yes, what it is that you want, and then it lays itself at your feet. So you are always supported. You 100% of the time have a team around you that's just waiting with bated breath for everything that you are putting out from your heart. And this is a very pivotal point for you right now, because you also have the choice to choose which direction you will go in, and will you take advantage of everything that's coming into you. I also want to invite everyone if you're on Facebook, to join me in my private group there. It's Self-Love and Heart Shifts. And it's just a daily reinforcement of self-love principles, because like I said, it affects us in every aspect of our lives. But this has just been wonderful. And I know that you will take all of what Sonia talks about, how to just be more present in your life and love yourself, and you'll take it on the road wherever you go to.
Thank you so much. Someone needed to hear that today. I heard that. I'm going to share 2 quick takeaways, and then we're going to close this up. So I have one takeaway is letting go is an integral part of receiving. That's a really great takeaway. And one other takeaway is I realized that I can choose to work on self-forgiveness. Beautiful. So thank you for sharing. Any other takeaways? We're coming back and going to read all the comments. Thank you again, Marcy. Such a pleasure. I'm looking forward to seeing you on Thursday. And join us Thursday.
Yes,
and
please
go
do.
to livewithmarcyandamy.com. The comment is in the section here as well. And we're going to see you there as well. Much love. Bye for now.
Much love. Bye-bye.